So apparently the 21st century faces a new kind of threat. The old school spies have had their day, and MI9 must create a new skilled breed of undercover agent hidden in a place no theory would think to look. Welcome to MI High. Yes, my name is Nick Thornton and I am a Randomfish, and I did just quote, hopefully directly, I'm not entirely sure if I got everything right there, from the MI High intro. MI High, for those of you who don't know, was a CBBC show that is still running now, I think, but it started in 2007. 2007, I was 17. What was I doing watching CBBC? Well, for most of you, you probably all went out and had social lives and did things and actually were contributing members to society. Yeah, not so much for me. I definitely was not one of those people. I went to college, I hung out at pubs occasionally, but I would spend most of my free time arsing around, watching TV, watching films, and doing whatever the hell made me happy. But you know what? It's not all that bad. The reason for it not being all that bad is that I can now talk to you about films like this. Shows like this, I should say. MI High would have made an interesting series of films, but I don't think they would have been able to hold in as much story, as it were, within this setup. So it's quite cool to sort of see this sort of show. MI High is sort of a reflection of an old Mission Impossible style show from the 70s, the 60s, 70s, something like that. But obviously it's done with kids and it's done in a school, which is a lot of fun, I have to say. Something I never kind of got round anyway was the very simplistic, almost, way of the characters. Obviously it's a kids show, so the simplicity of the characters is sort of something that needs to happen. But it is done fairly well, and I mean, in future seasons they do try and change it up a little bit, and they do try and make it a bit better. So it's not too bad. For myself, unfortunately, a lot of what I know is just from Series 1, because by the time it got to about a certain point, I was still watching Young Dracula, and all that sort of stuff from CBBC and Basil Brush, but I just wasn't as addicted to MI High, I guess, as I could have been with the other programs. So I only really watched 1.5 seasons, maybe. But I have looked into the other seasons, and I have watched some of the episodes now on YouTube myself. And honestly, this show is unique in that it's not overly unique anymore. Sad to say, but I had fond memories of MI High, and I thought when I review this film, when I review this series, I'm going to look back on some of the seasons, and I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to, have nostalgic, fond memories of it. I watched it, and all I kept on thinking was, this feels like... It felt cliched. And that's one of the sad things I have to say about MI High. It is insanely cliched. In that it felt very cliched from that point. Because MI High existed at a time period where everyone was doing the whole superhero, spy, sci-fi, that sort of thing within TV. Young Dracula is a prime example of this. The Sarah Jane Adventures is another good example of this, because while a lot of these shows did present you with some good mysteries and did attempt to actually engage you as an audience member, it wasn't as 100%. It wasn't 100% addicted to watching, because you didn't feel like I didn't feel very challenged, even at a young age, even when I was first watching this show. Yes, I was 17, but at the same time, for those of you who may have the same thing, I have dyspraxia, in which case my brain works just a little bit slower than most. It's not dyslexia like a lot of people will have, but dyspraxia is one of the sidebars, if you will, of dyslexia. Not to dilute its importance, because it is a very important thing. But for me, this show was something that could still slightly surprise me. I could figure out a Scooby-Doo mystery pretty easily. I mean, a lot of us could when we were first watching that cartoon show way back when. But for me anyway, it presented this very real concept, especially when it came to presenting a mystery within a show, within a kid's show at least. A kid's show mystery needs to be either very easy to solve, in which case it could almost be construed as a parody of a mystery show, in which case that's one of the reasons why I love Scooby-Doo, because it really did feel like a parody of a show. It didn't feel like a genuine mystery show, at least not until the later seasons. But I'm talking about the old school ones. Like, I'm talking Scooby and Scrappy when that first came out, and maybe What's New Scooby-Doo. I guess that was one of the more interesting ones to me. But to introduce a good mystery within a show, and to actually continuously have that pop up, is kind of interesting and it is kind of fun, but it's not legitimately something that you can always have on a good show. And MI High does unfortunately fall into that category. The villain faction is called Skull, and they tried to, for at least a small time anyway, they attempted to do a Dr. Claw thing. For those of you who are uninitiated, I don't quite understand how you're watching this channel. But Dr. Claw was Inspector Gadget's main enemy and the leader of a terrorist organization that he was always trying to stop. And his biggest thing was that he was always veiled in shadow. My biggest problem with that is that one of the big reveals is that they were always trying to catch the leader of Skull and everything else, as well as trying to stop and foil his plans. Now, I have no real interest in that, because my biggest thing about Claw wasn't that he got caught. My biggest draw when it came to watching Inspector Gadget and watching Dr. Claw with his menacing voice on screen was to hear his menacing voice. I didn't want him caught, because if he got caught, that meant the end of the show, which isn't what we want at all. Skull, unfortunately, you do want to see them get caught, because with it being this very silly thing, because he is not an intimidating villain either. He doesn't feel intimidating, at least not at all, at least not to me. The Skull infrastructure in general, it feels very... This show was made in 2007. So, half the villains in it. So why is it that half the villains in this show make me feel like I'm watching something out of the 90s or the 80s with their silly little gadgets and everything else? There's one of them in there that involves an ice cream truck for some weird reason. And my thought process more or less goes to the rather bizarre thought of going, what are you, a 60s Batman villain? It doesn't feel like a genuine threat to anything. And of course it falls into one of the other kids' show biggest tropes, which is make all adults look stupid. Now, I don't deny this, that a lot of adults, myself included actually in some cases, we can be very stupid about things, and we can be very blind to concepts around kids and to do with kids, and that's not a problem. But my biggest issue from this comes more to the fact of going, why then did you not at least make a few competent grown-ups in the show? Now, there is one, but he's still not as competent as the kids are in some cases. They're Bosley, if you will. To switch it up from the Mission Impossible thing, let's take it to Charlie's Angels, shall we? Because there's three of them and three of the Angels, dang it. Their Bosley was played by Cat from Red Dwarf. If you don't know who that is, please look him up. He's hilarious. But he's an okay character. He plays his role very well. He is the mentor of the group. He is the one who occasionally dishes out the lesson that needs to be learned for that week. Blah, blah, blah. All the good stuff that you usually end up seeing or hearing on these shows. I have no real insane issues with this show, aside from the fact that it just doesn't feel very rewarding to a young thinking mind. It just doesn't feel like that. That would be okay if it painted itself as a parody, and it doesn't. It paints itself more as a strong, amazing, sort of well-written show. And it might be a well-written show now. But I'm not looking at the newer series. I'm looking at the old school series because that's where a lot of this comes from for me. And while I get it that people will learn and people will adapt on these things, and that's absolutely fine, if you don't have a good, strong base to start from, then you're working backwards before going forwards. Which does not a good series make. It just doesn't. But anyway, I've complained about the villain, I've complained about the mentor. Let's take a look at the three main characters, shall we? Now, much like a lot of these videos, I don't really look at the actors' names. I look more at their characters, and if I look at the actors, then I might find myself more swayed towards a certain way of thought because I see them and I have to distance the actor or actress from the role. You have Blaine, who is the martial arts expert. Daisy, who is the girl who disguises herself and, you know, goes undercover a lot and everything else. And then you also have Rose, who's the techno geek. So, first off, these are the three characters who you would never see. It's the Breakfast Club of Spies. And again, it's another reason as to why I really don't like this concept. I don't like this concept of these types of spies. Kids who are from different walks of life, I have no issue with. However, if you actually see them becoming friends, if you had them becoming friends first, almost like as a build-up, or you could almost have had, like, the first episode or something, have them be slightly tested, but also have them be shoved together in a way that forces them to communicate and be able to talk about these things, then you could legitimately have good chemistry with these other characters. There is no overarching chemistry that I could feel throughout that entire first season. There is a bit of self-created chemistry that the show tries to shove down our throat between Daisy and Blaine, because apparently you can't have a show with a guy and a girl without them liking each other or think they like each other and then do the awkward teenage thing of going, oh no, I don't like them, that involves feelings, and, you know, we don't talk about that because we're teenagers. Oh, and also you're British. It's a traditional thing among the Brits, damn it. But I mean, Rose is, out of the three of them, a pretty good actress of what she does. She's able to sort of get across these characters a lot better. This, I feel, is more or less confirmed in the fact that she's in more seasons than they are. Which is a very strong testament to their ability, to her ability at the very least, and a very strong disservice to theirs. While I don't believe that they had strong chemistry on set or on the show, at least nothing that I couldn't see through, it feels like they're trying, but again, it's something I'm rounding off back to, actually, my whole traditional roles mentality. Blaine being the karate expert, the slightly thicker football player. Honestly, I hate that stereotype because it kind of creates this world based where, you know, guys have to be all tough and scary and blah 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 in order to get attention. It's a load of bull. I wish I'd been told that when I was a young lad, because maybe then I wouldn't have had so many anger issues, but still. But like I said, in future seasons that is challenged. There is the guy that becomes the undercover expert, which is nice. And the girl who's the strong one, the one who kicks ass. So that's cool. That's cool to have. And I mean, I'm not suggesting that all you have to do is switch around the gender roles and all of a sudden I'm happy. That's not it at all. I just happened to sort of look at this particular setup, and my thought process more or less went to, they're doing something different. I like different. I like seeing different on screen, because different means they're at least aware of the issue and are trying to fix it in some way. But overall, what's my thought on this as a show? I mean, as I have said before, this is, it's Mission Impossible but with kids. Now, if you want to see some good seasons and if you want to watch a good show, I do recommend this show, because while it starts off pretty slow, it does get good in the future seasons. So maybe start with Series 2 and move on from there. It's the same characters of Blaine, Daisy and Rose, I believe. But they're a bit older. It feels a bit more... it feels a bit more like they're trying, I guess. I think that's my major issue. It's not great by any stretch of the imagination, and the chemistry still feels slightly false at times, but it's an improvement over the first season. Which is really the only one I watched in its entirety, because, again, at that point in my life, I was still watching CBBC. And I just didn't, after that point, I stopped watching. But, like I said, if you want to see a fun-ish show about these things, about, spies and Mission Impossible style, but with kids in a school, and you want to see Cat from Red Dwarf being slightly awesome and have his hair sticking out like this, go check it out. It's a lot of fun. And while I'm not a fan of it myself, I don't know. Go check it out for yourself and see what you like. See if you like it, see if you don't. If you do, please comment below and tell me exactly what it is about the show that you like, especially the first season, because you know what? I'd love to hear some optimism about that. If not, if you prefer the later seasons, well then you know what? Comment anyway. I love that concept. Please go ahead, subscribe, follow my page on Facebook. I am a Randomfish. Follow me on Twitter at the Randomfish, or if you really want to get silly, find me on Instagram, Nick Randomfish. I post random photos at certain points of random events. It's nice. It won't be long now before I'm out of this cast, which will be nice, hopefully. And once that's done, maybe I can start doing a bit more standing up once again. Here's hoping. Randomfish, out.